As we know, especially in the DEI space, but really anything that's related to these people initiatives we help with, the biggest thing that we always hear is, we're not making any progress, not any better, right? And then when we go in and like, well, how do you know? And it's like, oh, wait,
Crickets,
where are the metrics? How are you measuring progress?
Right.
What is progress?
It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hi, Shantae.
And I'm Natalie, and welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by the Norfus Firm. At the Norfus Firm, we solve people problems, and we have the great pleasure of working with employers all around the world on HR and DEI initiatives. I'm excited.
Me too.
We have
This is
someone
gonna
who
be
is
great.
like our one of our faves. With us today. So we'll get into that in a second. But, you know, what would it be that we love to talk about data where we didn't actually have an episode where we dig into data? So metrics are important because if you don't have a way to measure your progress, you really don't know if you're making progress.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, especially in the DEI space, but really anything that's related to these people initiatives we help with, the biggest thing that we always hear is, we're not making any progress, not any better, right? And then when we go in and like, well, how do you know? And it's like, oh, wait,
Crickets,
where are the metrics? How are you measuring progress?
Right.
What is progress?
Right.
How are we defining that? So I'm super excited because we have Leah Wade, who does so many amazing things with us. I don't even want to give her title, y'all, because we're working on it because it doesn't even fit.
It does not fit.
She does not fit in anyone's box.
She's multidisciplinary, multifaceted,
multi-talented.
Yes, all the multis.
All the multis. And she's always ready. She's ready to roll up on y'all when y'all
Always.
don't know anything about your data. She stays ready. So she doesn't have to get ready. But what Leah brings to our work is a strong discipline around data collection and data analysis, right? We are very firmly of the mind that we are conveying the voices of your employees. We are not the voice ourselves. And so Leah's dedication to the discipline of data coding and data science really has elevated our work in ways that we hadn't imagined, because we were doing a lot of that ourselves, but nowhere near as involved and capable as Leah. So Leah, welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you.
So where I'd love to start you with is, how do we deal with resistance to data collection? I mean, a lot of how we collect data is through surveys, and we run into clients who don't even want a survey, but they want to have data. What are some of the ways to overcome that?
Okay, great question. First, let me say hi. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be on the podcast today. My first time on a podcast ever. So, this is great. Great question. So when we think about resistance, I mean, anytime you're doing this work, you're going to come up against resistance, right? It's tough, but it's also like a sign of change is about to happen. So we can kind of lean into that. It's not necessarily a negative. It could be a positive. But I think the first thing, and you all do this so well, is starting with asking a question, right? So we need to understand why is there resistance? A lot of times it's due to a lack of education. Maybe folks don't quite know or understand the importance of DEI. I think it often gets lumped in with feelings and how do we make people feel better, which can often be, there can be a resistance point with that in business where folks care about the numbers. But that's the point to lean in, right? Is like numbers matter. So my background is account management. I come from sales. I was revenue producing arm of the company. And so when I approach this resistance, it's always great to be able to turn to the numbers. And so being able to say, this is the way that we can prove impact. This is the way that we can relate what we're doing and doing it intentionally along with the company and not against the company. And numbers don't lie, right? So even if there's maybe some resistance in the beginning, getting maybe that first step of opening up as, you know what, I need something that can prove that this is more than just a feeling or more than just an idea or something that's hot or trending right now. We need those numbers to be able to prove that this is important. And so it allows us to be able to take a more unbiased approach. And if you don't have the ability to get into a survey or something more in-depth or sweeping across the organization, start with what you have, right? Like make friends with the talent department. Talent data is a great place to start. Where are there gaps in the recruiting process, hiring, promotions? Can you cross-reference that with any sort of demographic data? So there's a lot of little nuggets that you can find if you really look, and you don't even have to get into starting something from scratch.
You know, this idea around numbers don't lie. Mm-hmm. And I think when we're talking about numbers in our work, it's getting at, you know, percentages of people who feel certain ways mm-hmm. or experience certain things. It really trips me out to like, oh, well, our leaders are not really into surveying. And it always, because it's like, you would not make any other business decision based off anecdotes, right? Like you're not going to like invest in new software so that you can offer some new service without data.
Yeah, you do an audit. If it's technology, you're going to do a tech audit. If it's finance, you're going to do a finance audit. Like you're going to assess what's happening in a certain part of your organization before you decide to spend whatever money you're going to spend, whatever solution you're going to spend it on. Why would you not do the same with your people?
So what are some of the things though there like that? Because I can think of a few examples of like that where people have that resistance, but what does it say to you when someone doesn't even want you to survey their employees?
It's the cognitive dissonance for me, because on one hand, like this came up recently, on one hand, you have like representation goals, or you have something that you're trying to, Leah, like you said, impact or shift, but then you don't want to get the information that you need to be able to understand if you're even doing that the right. So what are we doing here? Like, what direction are we actually going in? It's really, really crazy. And I don't understand it. So it's, you know, I really appreciate, Leah, you saying, well, go with what you have. Like, what can you access, right? Where can you start? And then at least to gain a little traction down the road. So if we're talking about those points of what we have, what data do we have, what can we assess? Like, how do you know what to choose? Like when you think about, okay, success indicators, success measures, KPIs, OKRs, all the terms, how do you go about deciding which ones make sense for that really support diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives?
Yeah, so not to repeat myself too much here, but I think it goes back to the start with a question, right? As the three of us, we love data. You heard Natalie say it. I obviously do. It's a lot of what I do here. And it can be so tempting when you get the green light to just I want all the data. I want all the information, right? But then that leads to analysis paralysis. It can muddy the waters. It can give you a lot of work on the back end to actually do an analysis if you have too much data. So I think it's really important to start with where are there even gaps or opportunities. So some of the places that you can maybe look there is, and if we're talking about setting goals, I'll start with setting goals, aligning with the company, right? So our goal, our North Star is to operationalize DEI and for it to be part of everything we do. So really knowing what goals are your company trying to reach, and then where can DEI be used as a lens and to sort of make that happen. And then also looking at engagement surveys. So if you do get the green light on running an engagement survey and trying to understand the employee experience at your company, being able to get that data and cross-reference it across different groups, cross-reference it across different departments or levels of management. You know, we talked about, I think you have a podcast on middle management, or we should, if there isn't yet. But, where are things getting stuck? Where are there opportunities to lean in, maybe building some metrics around that, and metrics around, the next time you do the engagement survey, where you want to improve. But yeah, overall, just where is your objective? If folks from a particular group are finding that they're hitting barriers in the career advancement process internally, how can you capture that information? Okay, probably by a survey, and then what metric would you need to improve year over year to see that something is working or changing, and what strategies do you need to complete in order to get you one step closer to that goal?
This idea of analysis paralysis is really powerful. I mean, because I think it's, and I appreciate you bringing it up because we've experienced it.
Yes.
Like because we love data, we can be greedy. Give us that and give us that and give us that. And so I do appreciate you saying, Leah, bring that up, because I think it is important that there does have to be some balance. And if we're thinking about a lot of our recent conversations, folks are not okay, they're tired, we have so many things to do, that you could literally overwhelm yourself for like months and months, sometimes even years, like going through your people data. And so I think if we're thinking about if we're looking at the people aspect, there's a few sort of key things you could be thinking about that will lead you to the type of data you want to collect. For example, do you have a really high turnover rate? So are you seeing that, I think the average for a corporate turnover is somewhere between like 18 and 22%. Are you all consistently at 30%, 35%? Maybe if you're looking, then that you can dig into if you have processes around exit surveys. It starts to give you some information. Is it that, wow, year after year after year, we're at company town halls and all the C-suite looks the same? Like, is there something that we're missing in that? Like, so there are ways to guide yourself towards where you focus so you don't have analysis paralysis and that you don't feel overwhelmed and that every single thing is wrong and every single thing needs to be fixed, because that's not the point of this either.
Right. It's the thing that you brought up as you were talking. What was coming up for me was around but why do we care? Right.
Yeah.
Like, why is this important? And kind of facetious. We know why it's important, but I just want to articulate that because we do hear that people don't really understand why we need to be looking at this. So why do I need to ask questions about race or gender or sexual orientation? That feels intrusive. Do I need to know marital status? Do I need to know if they have kids? Why do I need to know this? And so, Leah, just would love, and Natalie also, your thoughts on that. Like, why is that important? That information, that data important for organizations to have?
Yeah. So, man, that's a great question. I think the first thing I will say, which is kind of an aside, and don't let me get too far down this tangent, but I just heard my husband shared that he was talking with some friends, and one of them had a scenario at their company where they wanted to change some sort of language that they use on a daily basis for their work that has, racial slur undertones, like the roots come from a racial slur. And so, very appropriately, they want to change that. But the person was upset because they got in trouble for using it. And there were other people at the company using it. They didn't get in trouble. This person got in trouble. And then obviously the conversation kind of boiled to, well, why do we even have to get rid of it? It's not bothering anyone. And it's so tempting to be like, oh, well, just because it doesn't bother you doesn't mean it's not bothering someone else. But I think this is why data is important, because you can say, well, where do we agree, right? Like, where I think we would all agree that we want the best talent at this organization. And the best talent might come from someone who fits a background that racial slur was used against. And why would that person ever want to work for us if we're continuing to use that language? Or would that person might want to choose us when it comes between us and another employer? So I think, obviously that person had some struggles there and was a little bit combative, but it should have been on the DEI practitioner's part as well to really explain why these numbers matter and what is the purpose, attributing to actual goals that the company is trying to reach that we can all agree on. It's so frustrating, I think, sometimes when it feels like folks are doing DEI just for the sake of doing DEI. Like, this is a science, and if you're doing science, you have to do research, you have to have data, you have to have a process, and you have to have a reason. You're not just going to embark on an entire research project just because, there's usually something that you want to find out. So I think it's really important to bring people along with you and help them understand why these metrics are important and where they impact the person or impact the organization in a way that they may not have originally thought of. I don't know that answers your question.
No, it does. And I think it's like if you apply this to any kind of relationship, like Leah brought up her husband. If Leah and her husband never talk about how they feel, how do they know if their marriage is going well, right? If me as a parent, if I wasn't, courageous enough when I could see that my son seems to have a problem with me to say, are you upset with me? And for him to say yes, and for me to say, okay, so tell me more about that. How will I ever know how my parenting is landing with him, like from him, right? You might see indications of, oh, he seems to behave so well when he meets adults and they comment on how great he is. But I mean, like that's like so tangent. Like, I don't know if that's because of me or because of something different. But I think it's this idea of, in a workplace, you want people to stay. And if they're not staying or they don't seem to be happy, how can you solve it if you don't know why? Right. And so I think that's the thing that's just, like, I know we're really spicy to get today. I just want y'all to know, because we're tired of y'all playing too much. So that's really what this comes down to at some point, is like, stop playing. But it's okay.
Gosh,
sorry.
No, it's exactly that. I think people make it harder than it needs to be. But because people aren't as black and white as, like, we're trying to fit people into numbers. Yeah. A lot of this work that we do, and that can be kind of challenging. So, I mean, maybe that's another thing that is a thing that we should talk about, is people come with their stories and they come with their narratives and they come with all the feelings and the anecdotes. And then we're trying to, as DEI practitioners that are data forward, trying to turn that into numbers or things that we can use to really convey something or to get someone to change or do something different. But that's hard. That can be a challenging jump.
So think about what the example Leah gave, right? Mm-hmm. Where I don't have a problem with this word. It's not bothering people. Why do we have to change it? What is your answer to that? Because I think that overlays on why people resist collecting data sometimes.
Exactly. It's, man, people are very self-centered. And so if I don't have an issue with it, in my experience, it's fine. What's the big deal? But they don't take the time to realize but you're in a relationship and you're talking to other people, and how we view and see ourselves is based on how we connect and react with other people, right? So it's like, although it may not be a big thing to you, to the point that Leah was making, it might be to someone else. And I really love the point that she was driving home around, but we want the best talent here. And if someone is coming in who may be a part of that group, and you're just like, you're out here saying something wild, they're going to take offense to it. They're going to leave. So you're not going to realize the benefit that you can really get from the talent that you want in your organization. I honestly think that's the best answer.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
We had this, I will note that I think we on our team are particularly sensitive to words that we know could offend people. And so they were like, oh, like we read them and we're like, oh, it hurts. And we were on a call with a client, and one of the people on the call said, we got to pull back the kimono. And there was an Asian person on the call. Leah's eyes are exactly like me and Shantae are like, what are you saying? And I'm certain that person is just an unconscious thing, but there was actually an Asian American person on the phone, and I'm looking at her and I'm looking at Shantae, and I'm like, obviously it's something we did give some feedback on after the call, because it wasn't really we're not into shaming folks, so it wouldn't have been appropriate in that moment. But you're thinking about those things that people just, in this self-centered way, just say, because they've been saying it. Mm-hmm. And if we keep saying, well, we've always said it and people didn't bother, and people weren't bothered, well, we could say the same thing about typewriters. I mean, they worked well. Like, why did we need computers? Like,
my mother still has at least 2 typewriters in the house right now.
Miss Ruby has a lot of things.
Yeah. But to that, I mean, to the point that you're making, language evolves, information evolves. Like, and so what I would love for us to even talk about now is how this work has evolved. Yes. Because when you started, and although I wasn't necessarily a practitioner like that, but I definitely was always involved in some DEI related something or other, even if we didn't call it that. You know, it wasn't this very data centered, data forward approach to the work. It was very much about sharing and stories and unconscious bias training. Just talking about.
Window dressing.
And window dressing.
And I think this is where like it's hitting a more of a stride. I mean, when I think about the first time I was on a DEI committee, I was 22. Mm. I have no business.
We're not going to talk about how long ago that was.
We won't. I mean, but people could do the math. But it didn't make any sense that I was asked to be on this committee, other than I was the only Black intern, or second. There was 2 of us, so one of us got chosen. And I thought it was very strange that a company that I was interning at wanted to be on. The guy was going to be there 10 weeks. That they wanted me to be on a diversity council. And I remember then it was really largely about the absence of discrimination. Like we can't discriminate. Like that's how people were talking about this work. And when you look at sort of the failures of DEI work, it's because it's been so anecdotal. It's been so feelings oriented. And Leah, I know you came from a company where you helped to sort of evolve, you know, their thinking around employee resource groups. Where when you started in your DEI journey, where were you with data and how did that show up? Because this is some decades ago we're talking about with my experience, but what about you?
Yeah, I think like many of us, I saw the most change like right around 2020 and the murder of George Floyd. So I had been a part of doing this work and like leading a global employee resource group for a few years prior. And it was just, I mean, we met obstacle after obstacle. It was like pulling teeth to get anything done. And we didn't have, I don't think we had a chief diversity officer at some point. But then that person left and, you know, it was kind of like this position was left in lurch and there was really no one who was championing doing this work. And so, except for us, right, in this, these employees that are sort of mid to entry level employees that are doing it. And so then after the Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of George Floyd, it was like all of a sudden, and we had some changes at the time, leadership wise, everyone wanted to know what we thought. And, you know, where should we be focusing our efforts? Who should we be giving money to? And our response was, we need to get our own house in order, because I don't care how much money, frankly, you give to other organizations when there are people here at this organization that need support. And so, and we knew internally, just as the group, that we were going to have to use every single moment we had in this before the attention diverted. Because as a person doing this work, like, you know, you only have their attention for a moment. And so we were like, we are going to just push as far as we can, so that, you know, when the attention dies down, we will have made some change and some efforts. And the company did hire, you know, build out a team. And so we saw some changes from that. And just in general, it was great to be asked and sort of platformed in that way. But it's sort of, you know, again, we saw the attention divert to other things and sort of start to slow down. And so that's when I think other folks have seen that too, where now there's a bit more resistance or hesitance. And I don't know, I think it's that's kind of where people are talking about now, like, what is the future of this work, and was it just for a moment, even though this is something that's been being done for so long. But I go back to what you said, Shantae, which is something my mentor Ben, I think, was on a prior podcast.
Shout out to Ben Delk.
Shout out to you, Ben. We love you. Ben, taught me a lot about DEI when I was like cutting my teeth. And he said, DEI is a lens that you look through. DEI is often the how, not necessarily the what. It's an auditing process. So anytime we do work, we can look through the lens of DEI and ask ourselves how it's impacting others. And so I would love to see it continue to go that way, to where we don't have to eventually have departments that are so separate from all the work that is being done, but they're really brought in to be the experts in this lens that impacts not only the employees at the company, but also very often the customers that are being served.
There's something that Leah is saying. There's an undertone here that I think is so important. I was just talking about this in the last few days of when your DEI efforts are there's a groundswell, meaning they're happening at the low to mid-range employee, and there's a lot of energy there. That's also telling you something. Mm-hmm. And if you're not being thoughtful about collecting the right types of data and being prepared to act on that data, I think employers are really missing the mark, that they're by not considering your employee voice, you could see a lot of things being overtaken, so to speak, right? Like little coups, because I think a lot of employees have recognized their voice in all of this. They have recognized that they can sort of silently protest in different ways. We see the signs of that with like quiet quitting and soft girl era. Like there's a lot of indication like that there's this sort of underlying tension of folks wanting to be heard, mm-hmm. right? So this also just comes back to data, because if you're not listening,
right.
And we've seen this, right? What are your thoughts there? Yeah. Like just thinking about this evolution.
Yes, of the work. The word that, I don't know if we even said it, but it's like the operationalization mm-hmm. or operationalizing this work. Because what you're saying to me speaks to culture, which is in terms of like the how that we're doing work Correct. In these organizations. And then the lens part is also a how. That's a way to look at how you're doing work. And when you see, to your point, these things happening, it's, to me, there's something that's not being operationalized well.
Yes.
And so what do we need to do? What do we need to explore in order to see where the breakdowns are within our organization? And then what adjustments do we need to make in how we do the work and how people experience the organization in order to really, in order to shift or kind of get control over, if you can control it, some of these things that might be causing a little bit of ripple in the organization. But it does take that thought of, this isn't something that's off to the side. It's something that needs to be a part of whatever work you're doing or how you're assessing situations within your organization, to the lens perspective that Leah was bringing in order to determine, okay, so what do we need to do? It's taking a shift in terms of how people do business.
Correct. And it's this idea that most organizations, larger ones, I should say, have some team that focuses on change management, right? Mm-hmm. Like, okay, we have been using, analog, and now we got to get this whole
digital situation together.
Say it again.
Digital.
Yeah, we have to move this whole organization. I was like, I'm so glad you said that, because I was like, what's the opposite of analog? Really tripped there for a whole second. And then my girl came and saved me, as she often does. But this, if you say we're going to move from analog to digital, you have to have processes in place to get people to actually adopt the new technology. Yeah. So when you look at, when Leah's saying looking through a lens, it's just a subtle but significant shift of, and when we do that, are there barriers to access for certain groups? So going back to your initial question of, well, why should we ask about all these different things, is that I know I might have mentioned it on this before, but we've talked about this a lot. We did focus groups for a global organization, and we did one specifically for folks with different abilities or disabilities, depending on the term that resonates with you. And it was so fascinating to hear all of the sort of workplace challenges and barriers they had because the physical locations that they had worked in pre-pandemic were not accessible. Right. One person in particular was very grateful for being able to work from home because he was wheelchair bound. And he was saying that they never put in the right door that would have it. Do you remember that? Where he was like that he had to ask people to come open the door from him every day. And it's like, I can't imagine anyone intended that obstacle, but if you're not actually looking at it, you don't know if, hey, we have this beautiful new place. As Leah knows, we recently did a survey. We had a beautiful new place at one of our clients where they never even thought about putting in a cafeteria, right? So that people had a place to go and sit and eat lunch. And it's this huge building. So it's just these ideas of that when we're saying the DEI lens, we're just saying we're saying elevate, right? Take it one more step up. And it's not even a huge step up, frankly, to be able to say, is this something that can work for most of us? Right. Understanding there's going to be outliers and you're going to have to deal with exceptions. But to me, when I think about a DEI lens is this working for most of us? In a meaningful way that doesn't require me to change who I am. And that it's going to help us propel towards, as Leah says, we're so big on what are your business goals? In general, right? You want to grow by X percent? Cool. Like, what does it take from a people standpoint to do that? It's just that elevation.
That's it.
Even from like a customer standpoint as well, I think we often think of, internal goals, which are incredibly important. I do think sometimes leadership can think of DEI as some sort of altruistic thing, which it is. Like, we should be doing this out of the kindness of our hearts, but there's also real opportunity with many of these groups. And I've worked for an organization before that, as part of an ERG, we really fought to get on the radar and to find, influencers from a particular demographic who sort of coincided with the organization's interests and who they were marketing to. And we were able to help put together campaigns that resulted in, tons of revenue for the organization because now they were focused on tapping into a market that they had previously not thought about. So it's also, it's not just protecting the company against risk or making sure folks have, are able to be their best selves at work every day. It's also like, what money are you leaving on the table because you weren't thinking about everyone?
So good.
Isn't that why we're in business?
Yeah, to make money.
And it applies whether you're for-profit, nonprofit, right? Money is, as to use your word, money is energy, and it's an energy that makes a lot of things move. So I think you just also gave us a topic, Leah, for a different day in terms of the external piece. We do talk a lot about the internal piece because there's so much work to be done, I think, sometimes with folks internally, but there's a lot of conversation to be had about how that impacts, your external brands. But I'm always it's time lady, and we're here. So I think if we just kind of think about the key takeaways from today, we understand that it can be uncomfortable to hear things you don't want to hear. So that can create some level of resistance to data. But any relationship requires you to look in it and understand, what's going on with it if you want it to be successful. So, it doesn't have to be some super invasive collection of data, but we're always going to be talking about what is your data telling you. We don't like to rely on anecdotes. They're not helpful and they're not really indicative of an overall theme, right? Idea here is to find the themes. 2, we really want to be working towards operationalizing. We really want to work towards operationalizing DEI. Simply put, integrating DEI into the fabric of what you do. This idea of a lens is looking at, does this work for most people in a meaningful way? And then I think the final piece is, yes, we want to think about our internal processes and how we work, but it's also being thoughtful of what money are you leaving on the table. And we'll talk more about that later. But I think if we use that as our North Star, that we're here to make money, DEI is in support of that.
Very much so.
And can really help you drive innovation and how you stay relevant, how you sustain your business and the like. Thank you for being with us. We're always happy to have you listening and watching. Leah, we love you and you are so brilliant. And thank you for shedding some light today on what you do every day. We got more to say on another day.
Yep, we'll be back. Follow us everywhere and we'll see you soon.
Goodbye.
Here it is. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.